Page 221. Unhappy Christmas. Amelia had been scrubbing the floor for 3 hours. Mr. Creeper wanted it clean by morning. He was obsessed with clean floors, but even more obsessed with making her miserable. She stared at her own hands. The knuckles were sore from the soap. She would have cried once, but she knew there was no point in crying anymore. The only aim she had now was to give up feeling anything at all. What was the point of having feelings if the only things there to be felt were bad? "Merry Christmas," she mumbled to herself. What a joke! There was nothing merry about Christmas. In fact, both this Christmas and the one before had been the most miserable times ever. Well, this Christmas wasn't going to be miserable because she was going to give up having feelings. "I feel nothing," she told herself, but then, to her horror, she saw a little fat tear fall from her eye and plop straight into the soapy bucket of water. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, and she tried to forget the magical morning 2 Christmases ago when she had awoken to see the full stocking at the end of her bed. No memories hurt more than happy ones that you can never get back. In that moment, she hated Father Christmas as much as Mr. Creeper. Father Christmas had let her know that magic was real, but what was the use of magic when it couldn't give you what you really wanted? The sound of a key in a lock, then the familiar voice behind her. "Stand up, Amelia," said Mr. Creeper. Amelia was too tired and weak to do anything but obey. "Turn around." She turned around and saw that Mr. Creeper was with someone, a man in too tight trousers and a long coat, with a white cloud of a beard. This odd man smiled at her. It was a warm smile, a totally different kind of smile from the one that Mr. Creeper always had. But she could not smile back at the man. She wondered if she still actually knew how to smile. "Hello," the man said softly. She said nothing, and the man winced as Mr. Creeper barked at her. "Talk to the man, you rude girl!" Amelia stared back at Mr. Creeper with the kind of look that could have frozen water. But Mr. Creeper wasn't water. He wasn't even blood. He was just skin and bone and hatred, and there was nothing a stare could do to him. "It's all right," said the other man. "No, Mr. Drimmick, it is not." "Hello," said Amelia suddenly. She hated how her own voice sounded. The word hello was a soft and trembling thing that died in the air. The man with the beard was looking at her with sad eyes. She liked this man and his silly trousers, but how could she trust him? What was he doing with Mr. Creeper in the middle of the night? And not just any night, the night before Christmas. "Sir!" shouted Mr. Creeper. "Hello, sir!" "Please," Father Christmas couldn't help himself. "Please don't speak to her like that. She's still a child." Mr. Creeper's eye narrowed as they studied the man. Amelia recognized the look on Mr. Creeper's face. It was cold suspicion. "Mr. Drimmick, may I be so bold as to ask you your first name?" The man hesitated, and in that moment had nothing to give but his real, actual first name. "Nicholas," he said. "Nicholas Drimmick. How interesting. My name is Jeremiah Creeper. Now that we are on first-name terms, I'm going to be frank with you. A child needs to know manners and discipline, and happiness, and laughter, and play, the 3 ingredients of life. What kind of workhouse inspector are you?" "One with a heart," said Father Christmas. And he stared quite sternly at Mr. Creeper. Amelia was now looking at Father Christmas. She was tired, and she was hungry, and soap water was itching her skin, but her brain was now ticking. Tick, tick, tick. Nicholas. There was something about that name, something familiar, even though she searched her brain and realized she had never actually met a Nicholas. She had a weird feeling that she knew this man, but couldn't think where from. "So, Mr. Creeper, why is this girl in here and not in the dormitory?" "Because she was caught trying to climb out of a window," said Mr. Creeper. Well, to be honest, I'm not surprised. She wants to escape, so we locked her down here and stopped her food. This man, this Nicholas Dreamick, was turning red with anger, Amelia noticed. And you thought locking her in a cell in the basement was going to make her want to stay? He said, the words flying out of his mouth. I don't care what she wants, spat Mr. Creeper. Who would care what a child wants? All that matters is what a child deserves. And I can tell you that I have known this girl for some time. Her mother was soft with her. She had it too easy. She was a rude and lowy chimney sweep, who was as grubby in manners as the chimney she swept. I suppose if you are surrounded by soot all the time, it dirties your soul. This made Amelia feel very cross indeed. She felt the crossness rising inside her like a brush in a chimney. She had not had an easy life. Yet there was Mr. Creeper acting like she had been a young Queen Victoria or something. And how dare he criticize her mother when her mother wasn't here to defend herself? But then the tight-trousered Mr. Dreamick said something rather peculiar while looking Amelia straight in the eye. Oh, I don't know, Mr. Creeper. I think you could still be surrounded by soot and be a captain of a person. Yes, there was no doubt about it. He was giving her a signal. He had emphasized those two words, soot and captain. He was telling her that he knew about Captain Soot. And then something even stranger happened. He moved. The man moved. Not stepped or walked, but moved without anyone seeing. He was now standing a step away from where he had been. And not just that, something had happened in between. She had imagined he had leaned into her ear and whispered, I'm not Mr. Dreamick. I am Father Christmas, and I am here to help you escape this place. She had imagined that he had called to his reindeer Blitzen at the top of his voice. And how could that have happened in the fraction of a second? Mr. Dreamick, you really are a very strange man, said Mr. Creeper with dry amusement. Yes, said Amelia, trying to give Father Christmas a clue that she knew what was going on. Like a captain, I understand. Amelia stared at Father Christmas and tried to send a message with nothing but her eyes. The message was, You've got to get me out of here. It's horrible here. I can't stand another day. And Father Christmas was quite good at understanding the language of eyes. Well, Mr. Dreamick, I assume you have seen enough, said Mr. Creeper. Let's find somewhere else for you to inspect, shall we? Amelia felt a desperate sinking feeling in her stomach at the thought that she was going to be left in that basement cell. And she realized that something she thought had died was still inside her. Hope. The hope of escaping. The hope of a better life. The hope of finding Captain Soot. The hope of being happy again. Father Christmas seemed to understand all this too, because he winked at Amelia. It was a very small wink, too small for Mr. Creeper to spot, but it was there. And the wink seemed to say, It's time. Page 229. Mr. Creeper's Shoelaces. Father Christmas pointed at Mr. Creeper's shoe and said, Look, your shoelaces have come undone. And Mr. Creeper looked down and frowned. That's impossible. My shoelaces are always double-tied. They never come undone. And yet you are right. They are undone. Amelia, tie my shoelace. Amelia hesitated for a second. Then she crouched down and tied the shoelace, just as Father Christmas was figuring out what to do. Amelia stood up quickly and pushed Mr. Creeper hard with all the force inside her, with every last piece of feeling she had, and he toppled back as Amelia ran out of the room. "Stop her!" screamed Mr. Creeper, and then he shouted again, with even more exclamation mark, "Stop her!" But Amelia was out in the corridor and heading up the stairs. Mr. Creeper stood up and tried to run after her, but Amelia had tied his shoelaces together, so he fell forward and landed flat on his face, his keys flying and landing near Father Christmas's shoes. "That girl!" he shouted. "I told you she was wild. Stop her!" "You just stay there, Mr. Creeper. I'll get her." Father Christmas bent down and picked up the keys. "What are you doing?" wailed Mr. Creeper. But it was too late. Father Christmas had shut the door and was already turning the key. "Mr. Mr. Dreamick, I demand you open this door at once. Do you hear me, Mr. Dreamick?" spat Mr. Creeper through the barred window he was now locked behind. "I am actually not Mr. Dreamick. The name is Father Christmas. Pleased to meet you." And then Mr. Creeper screamed a wail of hatred. "Ah, Hobble, Mr. Hobble, I'm down in the basement. Get me out of here." Page 232. Child on the Loose. Amelia kept running. Up the stairs, through the corridors. She knew that Mr. Creeper's staff was on night duty patrolling the workhouse, so she threw glances in all directions. She hoped Father Christmas was on her side, but he had let her down before. She just had to get out. She was running past the dormitories, knowing she had to keep moving. Then, as Amelia reached the dining hall just outside the kitchen, "Gotcha, you wild thing!" It was Mrs. Sharp, grabbing her arm hard. "Escaping the refectory, are we, Mr. Creeper? I've got a child on the loose, Mr. Creeper." Amelia tried to wriggle free, but Mrs. Sharp had a strong grip and a loud voice. She was trying to wake up the whole workhouse. "Child on the loose! Child on the loose! Everyone wake up! I need someone here!" Amelia felt the grip on her arm go soft, and she turned to see that Mrs. Sharp had turned into a stockpot. Mary, the kitchen maid, had tipped a massive pot full of slop over Mrs. Sharp. The pot was the perfect size to fit completely over Mrs. Sharp's head, and to trap her shoulders inside too. Porridge gray slop splattered and dribbled all over her. Amelia could now break free. "Get me out of here!" shouted Mrs. Sharp. "Get me out of this pot now!" But no one could hear what she was saying because her voice was just a sloppy mumble. She kept banging into things as she tottered around, and then she slipped in a puddle of slop and fell to the floor with a clang. "Thank you, Mary!" cried Amelia. Mary shook her head. "No time for thank yous." Amelia heard footsteps and turned, ready to run, but so it was Father Christmas. "Hobble's letting Creeper out," he said, breathless. "We've got to be quick." Mary smiled. "Had a feeling there might be trouble. Let's wait here, then lead them into the kitchen. I've made the preparations." The sound of Mrs. Sharp clattering around in the stockpot brought Hobble and Creeper to the dining hall, their footsteps echoing like thunder. Then, once they were in view, Mary, Father Christmas, and Amelia ran into the kitchen. "Stand behind the door," said Mary. So that's what they did. And it was Amelia who noticed the floor looked very shiny, even for a workhouse floor. She looked at Mary as the footsteps got closer. "Mr. Creeper likes us to keep things clean and shiny, so I made the floor the shiniest I could, using the butter Mr. Creeper likes so much," Mary explained. And then something funny happened. Something so funny that Father Christmas laughed his first ho-ho-ho in a while. Mr. Creeper and Mr. Hobble arrived in the room at the same time, but instead of coming to a halt, they slipped and glided and skated and slid right across the buttery floor, unable to control themselves. "Ah!" said Mr. Creeper. "Ah!" said Mr. Hobble. When Mr. Hobble tried to stand, he fell back onto his bottom, while Mr. Creeper used his cane to try and get back on his feet. "Wait," said Mary, laughing too. "This is the best bit," and with that, she untied the string next to her, and a handle began to spin. With a whistle, the giant piece of pinky brown ham that had been hanging from the ceiling whizzed through the air. It landed with a heavy thud on top of Mr. Creeper, squishing his top hat flat and knocking him to the ground one last time. He and Mr. Hobble were just a collection of arms and legs, like a crumpled spider. "Quick," said Mary to the other two. "You've got to get out of here." Page 236. Amelia's Last Dash. There were other people in the dining hall now. Mrs. Sharp had removed the stockpot and, though still dripping in slop, was shouting, "Stop that girl immediately!" A gang of obedient workhouse inmates guarded the door at the other end. "There's no way out that way, gal," shouted Mary to Amelia. "You're a chimney sweep, ain't ya? Maybe the fireplace is your bed spat." The Father Christmas remembered the fire was lit, and he thought of the boys guarding it. "No, it's lit." Amelia kept running, twisting herself free of the various hands that were trying to hold her back. Mr. Creeper's voice was now booming and echoing around the dining hall. "Stop that girl! Everyone, stop her! Stop her now! We've got to stop her! Hobble!" "What are we going to do?" shouted Mary to Father Christmas. Father Christmas was about to shout back when above the commotion he heard a very faint tapping sound, a soft clicking coming from the roof. Only he, Father Christmas, could have known what that sound was, because it was a sound he had heard many, many times before. It was the sound of reindeer hooves landing on the roof. "My dears," he said softly to himself. Amelia wondered what Captain Soot would do in this situation. She believed that cats were cleverer than humans, at least at escaping things. And she decided that Captain Soot would have jumped up onto the tables, and so that is what she did. She jumped onto the nearest row of tables and ran the full length of it, jumping off the end. "I can't see her, sir. There's so many people in here now, and it's as dark as a chimney," said Mr. Hubble. But Mr. Creeper could see almost as well in the dark as he could in the daylight. "There," he said, "on the tables. Look, she's running. She's going to try and get out of the door." "Don't worry, Mr. Creeper. I locked it." And Mr. Hobble held up a large iron key. "Very good, Hobble. Very good indeed." Amelia reached the door, discovered it was locked, then tried to push it open, bashing her shoulder into it. "Come on," she said. "Come on, come on." Everyone in the hall wanted to stop her from escaping, especially now that Mr. Creeper was there. The only people on her side were Mary and Father Cree. It was then she realized that Father Christmas was heading in the opposite direction. She saw him at the other end of the large room, turning his back and walking away. Typical. He was letting her down again. Of course he was. What else could she have expected? She felt anger flood through her like red-hot lava, and she beat against the large door. Mary had run into the kitchen and grabbed a saucepan and was now successfully using it to threaten anyone who stood in Amelia's way, waving it in the air as Amelia was bashing her fist against the door in frustration. Bash, bash, bash. But there was nothing Amelia could do. And Mr. Creeper now had his own bony, ham-scented hand on her shoulder. "There is no way out," he told her, his smiling curling devilishly. Bash, 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 bash. She gave up. Mr. Creeper nodded, satisfied. "You are going to be locked up for a very long time."